I don't think you're ever going to look at newsletters the same way after watching this video today. I'm going to show you why the standard advice to start a newsletter might actually be hurting consultant and expert businesses. And I'll show you what the most successful consultants do instead, almost no one talks about. First, I want to introduce you to Billy Bros. So Billy spent 18 months publishing a weekly newsletter, Billy's Monday Light Bulb, building an audience of thousands of engaged, ideal fit readers along the way. And next, he released a book with Tiago Forte, who's a best-selling author. The book is called Simple Marketing for Smart People. And when he launches it, there's a surprise. He was closing down the newsletter, which seems completely counterintuitive because everybody else, when they launch a book, if they don't already have a newsletter, they do the complete opposite to Billy, right? So they act fast to get a newsletter in place that they can point readers to. But Billy's a smart, accomplished copywriter who's worked with some of the biggest thought leaders and course creators on the planet, right? People like David Perel, Ali Abdaal, Layla Garani. So I asked Billy, why'd you do it? And here's what he had to say.
Let me provide a frame here that I think will help guide this discussion. This is and it's really a framework that I talk about. I mentioned it in a newsletter. You might remember this one. You can build your business inside out or outside in. And I've always been a big fan of building it inside out. What I mean by that is you start with the business, and a business sells a product or a service. And what you do is you find a product or a service that you can sell at a profit. So something that someone's willing to pay you for, where you can sell it at a price that is, that covers your expenses and then some. And then what you do is you work outward and you try to find ways to drive more people inward to that product or service. And so this is the way that I've always approached it. It's the way that a group, what I would call, and I want to get into talking about these two different camps in a little bit here, because this will also help our discussion. The camp of professional marketers, we'll call them, the way that they approach it. And I would also say it's the way that Silicon Valley approaches it too. If you're familiar with concepts and frameworks like the lean startup, when you have these venture-backed companies, they're not just starting a newsletter and saying, okay, let's see what happens. They're trying to find product market fit. That's why you see so many books and so much advice around customer interviews, where you go in and you're like, I don't care what I sell. I just want to know about these people, these customers, and try to find where their pain is, and I'll develop a product around them. Right? So it's that idea. I think product market fit is a good way to frame the inside out approach. You find product market fit on the inside. Once you find product market fit, you work outward into these colder and colder audiences to drive more people inward. Does that make sense?
Let's contrast that now with that outside in approach.
A mistake I see a lot of people making with email, and I think it's been, some of the confusion has come from this renaissance or revolution of email newsletters, is that they're starting on the outside. They're not starting with the business. What's the product or service that I can sell at a profit? They're starting with the cold audience. Let me create something. Let me publish an email newsletter, build a big audience. And then this is like the audience first approach, which you can probably tell I'm not a huge fan of. Let's build a big audience first and then try to find something to sell them.
What's wrong with that?
You can get a lot of followers, but that doesn't mean you're going to get customers or clients. Yeah, and look, you'll find exceptions, right? Like there's a lot of people who have very successful email newsletters. You can look at them and say, well, it's a good thing they started that email newsletter because that thing is hugely successful. And I'm saying this from the trenches. I mean, from the past 15 years of work in online businesses, being behind the scenes of online businesses. And I'll tell you, big online follower accounts, big newsletter accounts do not directly translate into bottom line profit at all. I mean, just off the top of my head, there was one person who came through our program. You were mentioning it, 2,000 people on a social media following. This person had 2 million followers on Instagram and was making less than $1,000 a month from that online business and still had a full-time job, despite all those followers. So it does not translate into bottom line revenue. And so it reminds me of there's this awesome older episode of South Park with the underwear gnomes. The South Park boys, they noticed that every morning their underwear was missing from their dresser drawer. And so determined to figure out what was happening to their underwear, they decided to stay up all night and spy on their underwear drawers. And what they discovered was that there were these gnomes, these mischievous gnomes that would come into their room and they're singing a little song, open the drawer, take the underwear, and then the boys followed them back to this cave. And they surprised the gnomes there. And so the gnomes are shocked. Oh my gosh, they figured this out. And they got underwear hanging from the walls, and they're, they got big bundles of underwear. And so the boys are like, what are you doing? Why are you underwear gnome stealing all this underwear? And the gnome says, well, let's explain it. And they pull up a blackboard and they have these 3 steps. And it's step 1, steal underwear. Step 2, and they just get silent. And there's just a question mark under step 2. And then step 3, $signs, make money. And then, like one of the boys, Kyle, is like, what's step 2? And the gnome who was explaining the blackboard goes, and he turns to one of his buddy gnomes and goes, hey, what's step 2? And the gnome goes, and turns to another one. Hey, does anyone know what step 2 is? Guys, what's step 2? And so it reminds me of the creator advice, where it's like, okay, build a newsletter, something happens, money.
And for me, this all leads to a natural question, which is, what happens when you build a newsletter to sell an existing product or service? Here's more from Billy on a common marketing error derived from using newsletters in the wrong business.
By far, the biggest revenue driver from people I've worked with has been email. And what you find is that the more emails you send, the more money you make. I think that's common sense. The more frequently you show up, the better people get to know you. You become, as marketing author Dan Kennedy puts it, the welcomed guest instead of the annoying pest. And you can make more offers as well. When you earn that trust and you show frequently in their inbox, look at how many offers, for any of your listeners, like think about how many offers you put in front of people per year. If you're not happy with your revenue, think about how many times you made an offer where you've given someone the opportunity to buy from you. And so what I find, you can go down this wayward path, is you launch a newsletter and you say, okay, well, every Wednesday the newsletter is going to come out. And you build this big following. This happens all the time. You build this big following, let's say, right? So you got a whole bunch of newsletter subscribers. Every Wednesday the newsletter goes out. You say, okay, I did the audience first thing. This is what all the experts, the creator experts recommend. Build an audience first. I did that. Now I'm going to launch a product. Now I'm going to launch an online course. A lot of the people I work with have online courses. Okay. Well, what you find is that when you sell an online course, you're going to want to send more than one email a week. And so I've seen this a lot. Again, I'm working with these people, right? I have a lot of empathy for them. I'm behind the scenes with them. They're like, okay, well, I promised them it was only a Wednesday email, a weekly email, but I can't just send one email a week if I want to sell my online course. So what do I do? And so they kind of handcuff themselves because they started by advertising it as this once a week newsletter. So you can either stick to the once a week thing and you're not going to sell nearly as many seats in your online course as you could, or you break your promise and you start sending, you send an email every day like you should be when you're launching an online course in that week leading up to the course launch, losing a lot of people due to unsubscribes. Maybe some people get pissed off and you just feel uncomfortable doing it. And you're like, okay, is this even a newsletter anymore? Because now and then you get a taste of it and you're like, oh man, I make more money when I send more emails. Why am I only sending one a week?
Devil's advocate again. This thing with newsletter, if I just say it's a newsletter on my website, it's a daily newsletter, does that eliminate all the problems that you foresee with promoting newsletter on your website?
But we go back to that problem, like why in like 2010 or so were people saying, don't call it a newsletter? It's because no one wants to sign up for a newsletter. What's the value in that? Like what am I getting out of signing up for yet another newsletter? So what was the advice back then? Well, it's what I think the advice today should be, which is give people value, deliver something of value. And so if you take that inside out approach, you're starting with a product or a service. Okay, you figured it out. You got something that works, right? Now you got to start working outwards and bringing people in. Well, you're not going to pitch a cold audience on your product or service, especially when it's something higher ticket. So what you do is you create a free piece of content. I like our friend Ryan Dice's metaphor for this. He calls it the splinter strategy, where if you picture a piece of paper, like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and you take a pencil and you just draw a square on one corner of it, like a small corner of that piece of paper, you tear that thing off, that becomes the thing that you offer. It's often called a lead magnet. Lead magnet, lead generation tool, whatever. You present that to a completely cold audience, okay, so someone's never heard of you before. They're more likely, what are they more likely to opt in for? So a completely cold audience, are they more likely to opt in for this awesome, valuable, free resource that you present them in, let's say, a Facebook ad? or opt in for Billy's newsletter, and they have no idea who Billy is, right? Of course, the first one, right? The free thing. So then they opt in for that, and then of course they go through some kind of a warm up sequence. This is where the email marketing comes into play. It'll probably lead them to something like a webinar or a sales page. They either buy or they don't, and then they go on a longer nurture sequence. Maybe you call that your newsletter at that point. But where in that scenario, that movie scene that I just laid out there, where is the opportunity to call it a newsletter? You can't really find one.
This all leads to another question. Should you view every email that you write through the lens of where is this going? What product or service does this email point to?
I don't think we should get so strict like that. Sometimes I love to write, and I have a very active mind. I'll say it that way. I have a lot of creative ideas, and there's things I just want to get out there. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, I am reverse engineering from our offers. And I mean, it comes back to what I talk about in my book, which is this technique called belief building, which the tagline of the book is the one question you need to win customers without gimmicks, hype, or hard selling. And to spoil it, the question is, what do my customers need to believe in order to buy? And what it is essentially a more sophisticated form of objection handling, which is typically something that is done at the moment of the sale. You usually hear advice around objection handling from salespeople and sales trainers, but you can extend it into marketing. And I mean, handling the objection of I don't even have a problem. I mean, that is answering that objection, but that's done through marketing, not through sales. So that's the job of your marketing, is to surface, if someone has that problem, to surface it, explain why they might be experiencing that problem, explain that there are different potential solutions to their problem, explain your solution. And so, yeah, that's how I view it. And that's how I teach it as well. Because I can't see any, unless you're doing the creator business model or the influencer business model, if you are selling a product or a service, I can't see an argument against doing it this way, where every piece of content you put out there builds the beliefs that people need in order to buy.
I'll start this video with the suggestion, don't start a newsletter. And the question here really is, what is your newsletter or email for? Are you trying to build a business that sells content, or are you trying to publish content that attracts the kind of people who buy the kind of product or service you sell? If it's the latter, the offer of a newsletter isn't the most enticing offer to compel that person to subscribe. So what should you offer instead? Well, you can work backwards. Billy suggests what Ryan Deiss calls the splinter strategy. So you tear off a valuable fragment of what you sell, something that kind of works in isolation, and you give it away as a lead magnet. And if you want to take this approach, here's where I would start with that. First, I'd take a good hard look at your service or product, and I'd identify one component that customers are consistently really impressed with. Second, I'd package that as a standalone resource, which could be a template or a framework or a series of essays that help the reader diagnose the root cause of the problem that they're struggling with. And the beauty of this approach is that it self-selects the right people. So someone who downloads your splinter is essentially raising their hand and saying, I have this problem that you help solve. This way of working backwards from what you sell to what you share transforms the way that you build an email list. Because instead of just accumulating subscribers who enjoy your content, you're connecting with people who are actively seeking solutions to the problem that you address and sell solutions for. And this is the distinction that separates consultants who are struggling to convert their audience from those who build thriving businesses through email.